So as a student, my question is, what advice do you have for students who are still in school or just becoming emerging professionals? What advice do you have them for tackling the home crisis issue, whether that is in studio or whether that's in real life? And then with that, from your own experiences and from your own backgrounds, do you think our current architectural education has to change anything to better prepare students to attack those issues?
Well, I'll start with that education question. I kind of talked about at the beginning, like that we inherit when you enter architecture school. There's an inheritance there in terms of how things have been taught, what our knowledge base is, and what we kind of agree is a kind of collective understanding about forms of architecture. So housing, as I was saying earlier, is really kind of deeply tied up in that kind of knot of inheritance and speculation, let's say. So I think part of it is kind of undoing that, and the undoing of that is a kind of rhetorical way of working where you are positing speculative questions about experiments around housing, right? So I'm always encouraging students to really kind of like ask experimental questions around housing, not ones that become utopian and unrealistic, ones that have a kind of attached pragmatism to them, but are opening up avenues in terms of how we rethink housing and explore it in new ways. Now, to use the term housing is incredibly general, right? Like we're talking about a huge scalar range, from micro housing to towers that are, tens of hundreds of stories high, right? So I think part of it is biting off a kind of like narrow part of that bandwidth that you can work on and that you have a kind of vested interest in, right? Whether it's rural forms of housing that have to do with workforce, densification in urban, infill sites, the rehabilitation of all this kind of abandoned commercial space that's happening before our very eyes. Whatever it is, I think like choose something, like get deep into it, get vested in it, research it, learn the kind of history behind it, and then experiment with it, test things out.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say one other thing is that we need more students in architecture to go into other disciplines and other fields that are heavily influencing the shape of our cities. So getting architects on developer teams, getting architects not just on their teams, but potentially in their offices, like changing the way they're even thinking about development so that it becomes an investment in sustainability, meaning sustaining the value of places. We don't need to just be creating environmental sustainable projects, we do, but we also need to create environments that people want to keep. One of the reasons we want to let the Kmart go is because it serves no inherent value to the community anymore. Had it been built in a way that we thought, let's restore that, let's do adaptive reuse, let's get in there, let's save that building. We need to think about that so that developers have incentive to see that there's actually value through architecture, right? And so I think it's getting architecture students out in the multidisciplinary field where they can be involved in doing those things, not just in small architectural practices.
I'd grab up your GB98 while you're getting your architectural degree. There's a gentleman I'm a great fan of in Santa Fe. It's Gabriel Brown. He's an architect. He also runs a construction company. And you've seen, I think Taos Pueblo popped up there on the screen at least a number of times today. And it was illegal to use a viga as a structural member that was supporting your second story for a floor in New Mexico between 2003 and 2023 when we passed the law into the state code again. And Gabriel took a body of mathematical confusion to me created by Sandia Labs, this deflection of a viga and how much weight it would bear. And he turned it into a viga span chart, which now, if you go get some land and you build a house out of Adobe, you don't even need an architectural or an engineer's stamp to put those vigas on to hold up the second story and to be the floor of your second floor. We basically re-legalized Taos Pueblo. It's really exciting. And Gabriel did that, and he did it because he was a young man and he lived in Dixon in one of those hippie houses. And so you asked very directly, how can we impact the housing question? I mean, just learn how to build your own house. and get your architectural degree and become a construction person. It's one of the careers that's going to last into the future as well as we confront this AI question.
Thank you.
And just briefly, encourage you to seek out all opportunities. Learn by doing, like my colleague said here. One thing I'm recalling now that I did in grad school was whatever program we were handed in studio, somehow I always added a housing component. Like we had a theater project. I tacked on theaters, artist housing on the back facing the tracks. We had a culinary art institute. I had atelier housing for visiting chefs. So if you want to do it, get it in there, sneak it in, explore it, experiment.
And don't stop doing that once you're out of school.
Thank you.